All right, I think we have most people in. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Miami Group's virtual October inning. And we're going to have two presenters tonight. It turns out Mayor Cranley has other high priority things he needs to work on, so we only have a half hour of his time. So we're going to try to skip over the business stuff initially so he can have a full half hour. We'll also have a second speaker, Larry Falkin, talking on climate change in Cincinnati. As usual, I hope everybody knows how to use the participants thing. If you want to use participant, see who the participants are, you can click on this participants icon here. You're welcome to click on the chat icon as well and direct chats either to Nicole or myself or the whole group if you want. We're going to have plenty of time to ask questions of Mr. Cranley, but let's hold questions until he's done with his initial presentation, I think. And Nicole, is he back in town yet or not?
He's not. So for everybody who's on, I think he might be having some tech issues. He's jumped off a couple times. So we're kind of waiting for him to rejoin.
Well, while he's doing that, I think I'll just go ahead with the introduction. Our first speaker is Mayor John Cranley. He'll primarily be talking about the huge new solar project the city's committed to under the energy aggregation program. He may also talk about Cincinnati's programs for social justice and leadership in climate change. So he appears to be very well aligned with the priorities and values of Sierra Club. I had a pretty long bio from him. I'm just going to take some excerpts.
I'm back now. Sorry.
Okay, I'm just introducing you, John, and we'll turn it over to you shortly here. Mayor Cranley believes in being part of something bigger than himself, and how to lead a meaningful life. He believes that public service should prioritize the common good and help those who are in need. These are the values that he and his wife are passing on to their son, and values that guide him as mayor. And I'd say values very much aligned with Sierra Club's values. Under his leadership, Cincinnati continues to make huge strides towards equality for all. Cincinnati has been recognized as one of the nation's most immigrant-friendly cities, ranking 18th, and for the 5th year in a row received a perfect score on the Municipal Equality Index by the Human Rights Campaign. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John to speak and stop sharing my screen, I guess, right? So he can, there you go. So take it over, John.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the technical difficulties. My computer just shut down for a minute, but hopefully it'll stay on. First of all, it's great to be back with the Miami Group and all the great work that you guys do on behalf of our environment locally. It makes a huge difference. I just want to take a few minutes because I want to leave a lot of time for questions. My experience with these kind of events is that people do have a lot of questions, and you can ask me anything, whether it's on the environment or something else. But let me just give sort of a big picture of what we're dealing with right now, and then transition a little bit into some environmental issues, specifically with most detail, the solar project, which I'm most proud of, even though there's a lot of other cool stuff we're doing, and then open it up to questions. So, big picture, not surprisingly, as I like to say, professionally, not personally, my personal life and my family is doing great, but professionally, for so many people in this country and world, this is the worst year ever. Just disastrous with the COVID crisis. The number of people who have died, sick, and then the economic collapse, the recession, furloughs, layoffs, entire sectors of the economy wiped out. And then On top of all that, we had massive budget problems because of the recession, and very difficult choices had to be made there. And then we had George Floyd and the murder of George Floyd, and protests for racial injustice. And then we also had some looting that we had to deal with. And then on top of all that, we've had historic high in gun violence throughout the city and neighborhoods. So I've been in and out of politics for 20 years now, and I love it. I feel it's a calling. And usually you have, in a given year, or once every 4 years, a major crisis. But we've had, I would say, all 4 major crises: COVID, the economy, racial injustice, and gun violence, all at the same time, all at extreme levels. And these are the same issues that every major city in America and the world are dealing with. It's not just us. I guess misery loves company, so there's some comfort in that. But I think that Cincinnati is better positioned and weathering the storm better than most, but that's cold comfort to people who are still suffering. And I say that for the following reasons. One is that we moved very quickly and embraced the longstanding great tradition of the public health department in Cincinnati, which is really light years ahead of most other major cities in America, to do the contact tracing, testing, and PPE distribution to the extent they were available, and very aggressive business regulations, both on holding businesses accountable for safety protocols. But also, we were an early mask mandator before the state and others. And I issued executive orders back in March that required physical and social distancing several weeks before the state. We also did extraordinarily difficult things together. The city council and I made very aggressive steps to ensure that we would survive financially, to continue to preserve the basic services of police, fire, sanitation, water, clean water, and sewage services that people depend upon. And we did some really extraordinary things. One, we received the ability to borrow $150 million if necessary. Luckily, it did not become necessary. We did 1,700 furloughs, which was one of the most difficult days of my life professionally. I mean, I'm sure some of you may have saw me on TV where I teared up and had to let people go temporarily. It was very difficult. And then we had funding that we give to agencies that serve the poor and the vulnerable, and we cut their funding in order to ensure that we could continue government services that are vital. These were not fun things to do. These were not things we got into politics to want to do. But I'm proud to say that all of City Council voted to do and support these steps. And I'm also proud to say that because we took those steps and because we got some federal and state dollars, by the time we got to July, we were able to bring back the employees and restore full funding to the human service agencies that were cut. But we saved, about $6-7 million over the 3 months we did those things, and that was a lifesaver for our budget. Cincinnati has been well ahead of the curve on police reform because of the terrible events of 2000 and 2001, and the changes that we made as a city to embrace community-oriented policing, to reduce use of force incidences, to de-escalate interaction between police and fire, citizens, to introduce tasers, to provide body-worn cameras for officers and citizens of the plan authority. Those are allegations of wrongdoing. All of those things have made a huge difference in our police-community relations. So we are embracing.
John, we're having some audio problems. You're breaking up a little bit here the last 15 seconds or so. Has anything changed at your end to affect your audio?
Okay, I am getting a note.
That sounds better.
It sounds better now. You're on mute now, though. You're still on mute. It looks like you came off for a second. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, my mute button disappeared. So you can hear me now still?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So, we have miles to go on racial justice reforms. But I think the main ones we're working on now have to do with small business formation, building and expanding the black middle class, economic investment in communities. And I think the next 3 to 6 months, I'm going to be hearing a lot more about that progress. Is it not working yet? Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. It's kind of on and off.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's when you're getting closer or what it is, but right now you're good.
Yeah, I've never had this problem before. It's so annoying. I'm sorry, guys. And then on top of that, I'm proud to say that with working with the police, we were able to support peaceful protests for several weeks. We had 2 nights of looting and property destruction and an officer who was shot at. And so we imposed a curfew and were able to bring that to an end within 1 weekend. But then the protests that were really inspirational and the largest I've ever seen went on for several weeks. And now finally, in the last 30 days, we've seen a reduction in gun violence. So anyway, prior to March of 2020, I would have told you that our most exciting things was the first and most dramatic expansion, the only ever tax levy to promote public transportation in the history of Hamilton County, which I, along with others, helped lead, called Issue 7, that we passed in the middle of the pandemic. Had the world not changed, I'd be talking about that and nothing else until I left, because it's, from a single legislative accomplishment, it's my proudest achievement over my time as mayor. 7 times in the past that Hamilton County voters have been asked to raise their taxes to support public transit, and every time they had failed until this year. And the coalition we put together was exciting, and it made a huge difference. The second, big thing is the work on anti-poverty. I can get more into the Hand Up initiative in questions. The third major thing that I was working on prior to the world changing was going after illegal guns and reducing the sheer crazy, gun shootings in this country that are way out of whack, and working with other cities across the country to unite as purchaser of guns for our police departments to try to bring pressure on the industry, the manufacturing of gun industry, like they did against tobacco and others, to get them to change their policies for more gun safety and to reduce these massacres and inner city violence that we see. And the other major thing, which is I'm going to talk about now, is our incredible investment in the environment. We will be, by the end of 2021, the equivalent of the amount of energy it takes to run the city, and I don't mean private part of the city, I mean the city government, but that includes distributing clean water through pipes, and that takes a lot of energy to do, to 2 million customers throughout the region, and 800,000 sewer residents that receive sewer services from the city. By the end of next year, we will have 100 megawatts of energy and solar, the largest solar array anywhere in the country, led by a city. Meaning there are some others that are bigger that are purchased by Fifth Third or whatever. But in terms of a city acquisition, this partnership includes an African American-owned business partnership with the IBEW union, and the pricing is such that because we are going so big, we're able to get economies of scale and bring down the price to make it competitive with fossil fuels. So we're not paying up for this energy. We're actually saving money and diversifying our load, but most importantly, dramatically reducing our carbon footprint in the city. And the way we did it is, first, we guaranteed about 35 megawatts of energy from direct city usage. And then secondly, because Cincinnati is an aggregator on behalf of private residential homes, we're using that buying power, and that's about 800 megawatts per year, to buy an extra 65 megawatts of solar energy. And so we don't know of any other city or anywhere in the country, but certainly not in Ohio, that has figured out how to leverage their aggregation authority to invest in clean renewable energy. So that is sort of a big picture reflection on the state of the city and the world as I know it, and a little extra detail on the solar project. But, before it gets too late and I have to go in about 15 minutes, I wanted to open it up to questions and anything that's on your mind.
Jump in, John. Can you give us any kind of an update on what's going on with the dirt that was removed from Lick Run and deposited in Villa Hills, Kentucky, that's been contaminated? It was in the news this morning.
I don't. I can get back to you, but I don't have an update on that.
Okay, and then how about an update on the city-county disagreements on running MSD?
Well, I mean, big picture, we don't get complaints about our delivery and service of water very much. And so I think we would run and do run, can run the sewer system similarly to our water stewardship. But the county continues to spend millions of dollars on outside consultants and refusing to let us invest in the consent decree projects that have to be fixed. There are literally hundreds of millions of dollars of projects that we want to move forward on that the county refuses to authorize the spending on. And even if you go back to the submission for phase 2 of the consent decree, we were asking to do more work, not less, than the county, and the county refused to agree to aggressively pursue those projects. So I think that we are trying to follow the science and do the best job that we can to fix the problems. And I mean, the one that drives me the craziest is the pumping stations down at the Mill Creek headquarter location, which is already past its useful life. It must be the number one priority of the system because, as you know, roughly 68% of the sewage is at that location. And it would be an economic and environmental catastrophe if the pumps broke at the same time. And so, which is a real risk. And so we have aggressively pushed that, and the county has refused to authorize the necessary spending on design and engineering to make sure that we can replace them all in 10 years. And even if we started today, it would take us 10 years. And every day we wait is a day where we could have a catastrophic spill. So those are my, we haven't talked about this publicly in several months, but because of COVID and everything, but those are my big picture thoughts.
Well, it sounds a lot like nothing's really changed in terms of resolving the conflict. County blames the city and the city blames the county.
Yeah, I mean, but there are things that, intervene like facts. And the reality is that we are more aggressive. Our timeline is more aggressive on doing a consent decree, and not all consent decree projects are equal. And I would hope you would agree that fixing the pumps at the Mill Creek would be the highest priority. And so we would certainly love your help in pressuring the county to approve the projects that need to be done in order to, fully complete the consent decree.
Well, we asked for the benefit cost studies and the analysis on those quite a while back, but there wasn't much to it. So if there's something, if you have an update, which is got facts to back up what you're talking about, and what would be the best solution?
So the facts, Marilyn, are that, as you know, at Mill Creek, you have a huge amount of tanks with sewage in them. And if it rains, they can overfill and flood the Mill Creek and the Ohio River and downtown and Lower Price Hill and Queensgate, et cetera. And you have to be able to move the sewage and the water around to treat it. And that requires pumps. And those pumps are very, very, very expensive. And those pumps have outlived their useful life. And every engineer and scientist and every report we publish says these things. And we have been screaming up and down that they have to be fixed, and that failure to fix them could be catastrophic. So those are the facts.
my name. What should I have? What about the plastic bag?
I do want to make sure that we get to everybody's question who wants to, ask something. And Carol Cohn has had her hand raised for a second. So Carol, go ahead.
Yeah. Mayor Cranley, could you touch on the issue of the city fleets being converted to electric vehicles?
Yeah, we have made real progress. I don't have it off the top of my head, the number off the top of my head, but we've made real progress, and we're going to make more over the course of this next year. In fact, we're using some, I forget if it's grant money or money we got out of a settlement with Duke to purchase more electric.
I can unmute.
And I'm also a proud owner of a electric vehicle, a Chevy Volt, and it is absolutely a priority. I mean, I just listened yesterday to a wonderful podcast with Governor Gavin Newsom of California, and how they're outlawing gas-fueled cars by 2035. I don't think that's something we can do in Cincinnati or in Ohio, but I do believe that by diversifying our fleet as aggressively as we can make a real difference in reducing our carbon footprint.
Hi, Mayor Cranley, this is Marie Kukosius, and I want to just thank you for your support of the plastic bag ban ordinance in Cincinnati, and hopefully you'll do everything you can to make this a transition into a reality. I mean, I think that we know there's more needs to be done, and we understand that the OES has asked for help in implementing the regulations. So we hope you'll continue to support that for us.
Absolutely. I was proud to sign that legislation, and I want to give credit to you, who has been a tireless advocate on that issue for many years.
Thank you.
And honestly, it's a classic case of it would not have happened had not people like you and your leadership pushed it so hard and so aggressively for so many years. And I want to give credit to Councilman Seelbach for leading the effort, and all of council, or most of council, that voted for it. And I'm proudly signing it. I'm also proud that we live in a community where Kroger is committed to the same transition. And, it was interesting to see their own thinking evolve on the topic, where they announced their plans, and they were originally opposed to a government mandate. But by the end of the process, they felt okay about what we were doing. And, it's not, we don't need their permission, but it is, they are a company that employ a lot of people in our city, and investing in a new grocery store downtown, which is great. And, they have a union workforce that pays, living wages. And, they have been trying to be very responsible on environmental issues, and I applaud them for that.
We have Gwen Marshall next. I'm going to give you a second to unmute yourself, Gwen, if you want to ask your question out loud. If not, I will read it from the chat.
Okay, lots of clicking there.
We can hear you now.
Great. You were talking about pumps with MSD, and I was wondering if you were talking about Guest Street or SSO 700, because that's where tanks are. I don't recall tanks at Guest Street, and that's why I was questioning which one you were talking about.
I'm talking about the one in Queensgate, where the headquarters is of MSD. Yeah.
So you're talking about like the pumps that run the water to the Ohio River on a good day, or are you talking about the high water pumps?
Well, I don't claim to be an engineering expert, but my understanding from our engineers is that whether the water is in the tanks before it's treated, or the water is being sent to the Ohio River after it's being treated, all of that requires pumping. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but that's my very rudimentary understanding of it.
Okay, well, you've definitely left me with a question, and Deb Leonard will definitely be getting an email.
Great.
And I'll tell her I went back to work where her kid goes to school.
All right, good.
Thanks.
We don't have anybody else on deck right now, so if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Doug. I wanted to ask about this American Cities Climate Challenge grant that you recently were awarded. I could comment on what that's about.
Honestly, it's very encouraging, and we've actually won several climate grants from Bloomberg and others over the last couple of years because of the great work of the Office of Environmental Sustainability, the great team there, the commitment by the City Council, myself, all kind of rowing in the same direction. You know, whether it's becoming the most renewable city in America with our solar project, to the creation of the 2030 district, which I didn't even mention, which is we're now in the top 10 of American cities who have the most square footage committed by private sector companies that I've personally recruited, and other people have recruited as well, but I have definitely put time into this to get a group of business and property owners in downtown, over the Rhine, and elsewhere to commit that by 2030 they will reduce their carbon footprint by 50%. And to do it so in a spirit of transparency and collaboration. And this is, I mean, like, we're not mandating it. We don't have the legal authority to mandate it, but we're just using the power of moral persuasion. The aggressive work to convert our fleet to electric, the ban bag that Marie led on, all of these things are showing a comprehensive approach to environmental issues. And it is nice when you work hard on these issues to get some national recognition. And these grants really have come with compliments to what our whole team has been accomplishing over many years.
I've not been called on, but it's Marie again. What do you see in the future for us? Like more things environmental and good for the environment?
Well, I think that it's hard not to keep going back to the solar array, because, you know, at the end of the day, the most existential threat, in my opinion, is carbon footprint. And so renewable sources and energy efficiency that reduces demand for fossil fuel energy is, I think, the most important thing. The leveraging of our own energy to add in the aggregation customers. And also, because of our economies of scale, and we have many, many acres that haven't been used yet, I'm in the process of trying to allow other cities, smaller cities, or counties or others who would like to just buy at the prices that we were able to obtain, because solar becomes difficult to afford economically in tough budgets if you're trying to do it one at a time on top of a roof or whatever. And so you really need economies of scale to bring down the price. And we were able to achieve that. And we can go to, you know, whether it's Cheviot, or we can go to Dayton, or we can go to Hamilton County, or we can go to these smaller jurisdictions, Athens, Ohio, other places like that, who are interested in being a seller of energy instead of just a buyer. And that creates opportunities for them to get at. They can't afford, nor do they have enough energy to justify a purchase as large as ours, but they could come in at 5 megawatts, 2 megawatts, 3 megawatts, and get the benefit of our pricing. This has been great. I am running out of time, Nicole and others, but this has been, as usual, awesome to see the same activism that so many of you have put forward for so many years. And I really think, like the plastic bag ban, you know, that those efforts are paying off huge dividends.
John, what are your plans for the future personally?
Well, I think we're going to have to see what happens. God willing, Biden wins, and we'll see what happens after that. I serve through the end of 2021. It's public information that I am seriously considering a run for governor, and I do think that HB 6 is the worst bill I have ever seen. I stood with many of you protesting it at the time it was passed, when many Democrats refused to do so because of the union support that it had. And we became the only state in America to gut clean renewable energy standards. So I'd like to restore those standards. I also would like to invest in solar and wind and the manufacture of those parts. I'd like to see Ohio become the electric car state of the country in terms of manufacturing. And I'd like to see, there's ideas about both, sort of helping people get out of poverty and incentivizing clean energy. And one way Ohio is a very energy rich state on fossil fuels, whether it's coal, natural gas, oil. And so you could imagine a dividend from, the extraction of those, sort of a fee, and then a dividend back to Ohioans making ends meet, similar to what they do in Alaska. But the net effect of that would be to incentivize clean renewable energy sourcing. And I think those kinds of ideas could really excite environmentalists, but also do it in a way that people feel that it's not going to cost them money, but they'll put more money in their pocket to help pay their bills. And things like that, I think, would be exciting to take around the state. But those kinds of decisions and thought processes I'm going to go through after the presidential race shakes out. Thank you all. Thank you all.
John, we appreciate you coming, and it's been refreshing. You've been very open and forthcoming, and it's good to hear your views on all of these important points.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks. Okay. All right, let me share my screen again.
So, Doug, I have not seen Larry join. However, there is one phone on here, and I'm wondering if that is Larry.
I've been in touch with him off and on here, and he says he's going to be on shortly. So,
okay,
if
great.
Somebody new, that might be him.
It's not anybody new, but I'll keep my eye on it. Thanks.
All right, keep your eye on it. So at this point, we're gonna proceed to the business part of the meeting. So I'll get back to some of the announcements we've been making at each of these meetings. Due to health precautions, all in-person events are canceled or made virtual until after February 28th, 2021. So we're continuing to have no in-person meetings, public events, or outings through this time. We shouldn't even be scheduling things prior to this date. So we're looking for an update, certainly by the end of February, from National on that. Our next inning will be our annual vacation presentations by club members. I've got 3 or 4 people already who are signed up. If other people want to present on a vacation from this year or one from some other year, as long as you haven't presented it before, you can still do that. So let's move on to announcements from committee volunteer leaders. Anybody have an announcement they would like to make? I'll take that as a no, unless
In perfect timing, Doug, because Larry just joined. So whenever you're ready to transfer over to him, he's here now.
Okay. Do we have an update from Rich on the Legislative Action Committee this month? I don't think so. I didn't get any communication from him, so I'm going to assume that we don't need that either. So no other announcements. We'll proceed here.
Well, if I could give you one quick one, just to remind people about our endorsements. We're trying to elect good environmental candidates, and those are all on the website.
Okay.
A reminder.
Thanks, Marilyn.
To help out those candidates if you can do so in a COVID environment.
Thanks for that reminder, Marilyn. I will, for everybody who's on a computer, I will put the link to that in the chat for our website if you want to check that out.
And for some reason, I'm not moving on to the next screen properly here. So I'll wing it in terms of introducing Larry Falkin. So Larry is the director of the, I don't have the name of that, the full name of that thing right now.
Office of Environment and Sustainability.
Yes, thank you. And has graciously agreed to join us tonight with an update that I'm sure is relevant to all of us. And so I appreciate him coming forth on short notice here. It's been a little bit difficulty apparently getting him in, but he's in now. So go ahead, Larry, and get started.
Great. Thank you, Doug. And let me start by sharing my screen, if that's enabled here. Looks like it is. It'll just take me half a minute to get that open. Good. Are you all seeing my screen now?
Yes, we are.
Great. Let me put it in full presentation mode. There we go. So great. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all today. As Doug said, I'm the director of the City of Cincinnati's Office of Environment and Sustainability, and have worked with many of you in the past, so appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I unfortunately did not get a chance to hear the mayor's comments. Something else was going on right up until a few minutes ago. So hopefully I won't be repeating the things that he said. I will presume that he talked mostly about the solar panels that we have in the works here, and so I will cover other aspects of the city's sustainability program. And particularly, I wanted to talk about what climate change means for Cincinnati specifically, as opposed to the more generalized discussions of climate change that I know that this audience is going to be very familiar with. So when we see climate change in the national press, it mostly looks like coastal storms and major wildfires. My mom lives in Santa Rosa, California, is currently in the midst of her third evacuation in 4 years. And so these are the very familiar images of climate change in the national media, but they're not the lived reality here in Cincinnati. We are comfortably above sea level, far from coastal storms. We're in a wet and getting wetter environment rather than a dry and getting drier. And so wildfires are also not our reality. But that doesn't mean that we get a pass on climate change. What climate change looks like in Cincinnati is several things. One is intensifying rainstorms, especially microburst rainstorms that drop 5-6 inches in a couple of hours on a very localized area. That exhibits itself in flash flooding. For a long, long time, Cincinnati has known flooding, but we've known mostly riverine flooding, the kind of flooding that happens when the Ohio River or maybe the Mill Creek or the Little Miami rises out of its banks. And those tend to flood the same properties in the same order every time. It's a problem, but it's a problem we're very familiar with. The microburst rainstorms are causing flooding in places that we had no idea were prone to flooding. And so you get situations like in 2018, when people were being rescued by boat from the Norwood Lateral, something that was just outside our expectations. the photo that you see on your screen on the lower right is actually, that's a blowout of a storm sewer, a 14-foot, actually a combined sewer, 14-foot, constructed around 1900 out of brick. And that photo was taken on the Xavier University campus. That's the Xavier University soccer practice field. And everybody except MSD had forgotten that the bank at the back of the field was actually a sewer main, not just a wooded hillside, until it blew out. And in the space of about 5 minutes, the Xavier soccer field was covered under 5 feet of water. Fortunately, nobody was on it at the time because it was pouring rain. Already, storms in our area have intensified by about 37%, and we're just in the foothills of climate change with the mountains ahead. And so what do we do as a region to prepare for flash floods? We can talk about hardening infrastructure, building bigger and stronger pipes. That is a solution that costs billions and billions and billions of dollars, makes the current consent decree look like small change. It's not the way we're going to solve this problem. We can improve warning systems so that all of our phones are set to alert when we are in the vicinity of a storm that might be threatening to us. We can do common sense preparations in our homes in terms of, you know, making sure our sump pumps are working and, you know, preparing for sewer backup, storing things off the ground, those kinds of things. But we're really just on the leading edge of figuring out as a community what our preparations for these intensifying storms are going to look like. Maybe it's going to look like a major campaign to do green infrastructure improvements so we can hold more water where it falls and have less of that water get to the places where our pipes can't handle it. The next major thing that climate change, so I should pause for a second and say, if anybody has questions as I go along, I'm very happy to field questions and have this turn into a discussion. Would be perfectly okay with me. The way it is on Zoom, I can only see about 5 of your pictures at a time. So if you want to put things in the chat box or raise your hand, then maybe Doug or Nicole can assist me by, you know, wave your hand and get my attention and insert the questions as they come along, and that'd work just fine. So the second thing that climate change looks like in Cincinnati is intensifying heat waves. And many of us tend to underappreciate the importance of heat waves. They don't do a lot of property damage. It's hard to take a picture of one, but among all natural disasters, they are by far the biggest killers. They are the ones that cost the most human lives. The graph that you see in the middle of your screen right now shows daytime high temperature versus mortality rate by day in Cleveland, Ohio. We don't have this data for Cincinnati. And so what you see in this graph is from about 0 degrees to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The graph is relatively flat. The temperature of the day has relatively low impact on mortality. But when you get up to about 95 degrees, that curve just takes off. And in a city the size of Cincinnati, what this means is on a 95-degree day, we expect that there are 6 additional deaths that day in Cincinnati. And most of these are not people that are dying from something that would be medically called heat related. You know, it's not, it's people having heart problems and respiratory problems and even increases in street violence that are tied to the temperature. And so we don't know exactly who these people are or exactly what's causing the increased mortality. But if we assume that Cleveland's experience is similar to our experience, then on a 95-degree day, there's 6 additional people dying in our community. And it's really important for us to know who they are and what the circumstances are and how we intervene on their behalf. When we think about extreme heat, we're really thinking about the overlay of 3 factors. One is people, individuals, who are more vulnerable to heat than the general population. And that means the elderly and the very young, people with pre-existing medical conditions, people who take medication that makes them vulnerable to heat. The second thing is urban heat islands. And when you look at the illustration on the left side of your screen, what you see there is heat as a function of location on a hot summer day. And the more buildings and paved surfaces you have, the hotter an area gets. The more trees you have, the cooler an area stays. And you can have as much as a 15-degree difference in temperature within one metropolitan area between the relatively cool areas and the relatively hot areas. Just this summer, we did heat mapping in Cincinnati. We got a technical assistance grant from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They provided us with some heat logging equipment so we could recruit volunteers, and on a given day that was expected to be a high heat day, within a specific hour time frame, we had about 15 volunteers driving specific routes in the city and heat mapping the temperature fluctuations from location to location. We'll be getting the data in about a week, and then we will know specifically where in Cincinnati the hot spots are. But our expectation is that, you know, any of us can guess that areas like downtown and areas with low tree canopy are going to be the hot areas. Areas like Mount Airy are going to be the cool areas with lots of forest and trees. And most of our low income and high minority communities are going to be lower in tree canopy than most of our more affluent communities. So this is one of many areas where environmental equity becomes a really critical concern, especially when you overlay with the urban heat islands. The fact that within Cincinnati, there are about 12,000 households, according to the Census Bureau, that live without any air conditioning. And the third overlay in this, it's people who are especially vulnerable, people in urban heat island areas, and people who live without air conditioning. And the intersection of those 3 sets is where we expect most of our heat emergencies to come from. And unfortunately, the places in our city where people live without air conditioning and the places in our city that have low tree canopy are probably the same places. And so we'll have that data shortly, but then it's a matter of addressing those tree canopy deficits in specific neighborhoods. And our Parks Department is working on that. Our Urban Forestry Division is targeting their tree plantings to those tree deficit neighborhoods. It's making sure we have cooling shelters, although cooling shelters are particularly problematic during the COVID emergency because we don't want to put a lot of people crowded together in hot conditions. Creating caring networks, maybe even the Green Cincinnati plan recommends requiring air conditioning in all homes and all occupied structures. Another uniquely Cincinnati climate impact is mudslides. When we get our intensifying rainstorms, they fall on our unstable steep slopes. What you see on your screen is Columbia Parkway. Recently, City Council voted $20 million for landslide stabilization on Columbia Parkway, basically for retaining walls to hold back these unstable slopes. Where did they get that $20 million? By canceling the police station that they intended to construct for District 5. And so when we see city government trading off existing priorities for our community, priorities like public safety, that we have to sacrifice in order to deal with the costs of emergencies fueled by climate change. That is what we expect to see more and more going into the future, is escalating emergency response costs, crowding other things out of our federal and local budgets, and making it harder for us to meet our other priority needs. And then climate migration. And Cincinnati is what I sometimes refer to as a climate haven, because even with our flash flooding and heat waves, we've got it better than many other communities. We are a place that people are likely to migrate to when they find their current homes to be too risky because of advancing climate. It's not a hypothetical thing. The chart that you see on the left of your screen is what we call the Katrina diaspora. It is where people moved to from New Orleans in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And the little gray spot that you see circled in red on that map is Cincinnati. And the roughly 2,000 families that moved to Cincinnati from New Orleans in the aftermath of Katrina. So as we see other coastal areas being hit repeatedly by storms, as we see West Coast areas being hit repeatedly by wildfires, the demographic estimates are that there's going to be a lot of people on the move within the United States because of climate pressures, and places like Cincinnati are the destinations they'll be going to. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends upon your perspective. It might be an opportunity. And since we are a city built for 500,000 that now has 300,000 in it, it might be that now is the time to recruit businesses and individuals to come to Cincinnati for all that Cincinnati has to offer, including relative safety from climate change. The billboard that you see on your screen is not a real billboard. It's a computer mock-up, but it's our idea of what it might look like if we were to post something along the Florida evacuation route, so that when people are fleeing the hurricane for the nth time and stuck in a traffic jam trying to get out of town, that might be the time to plant a message like this. So one of the things that we need to be doing is slowing climate change down, eventually reversing it. And when we start talking about mitigating climate change, we have to start by understanding where our greenhouse gases are coming from. And so the pie chart on the screen is the results of the greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the city of Cincinnati. We know that about 1/3 of our emissions come from commercial buildings, about 1/3 of our emissions come from transportation, an additional big slice comes from industrial buildings, and then residential buildings and solid waste are what round out the screen. There's a couple of very important things that are not in that pie chart, not because they're not important, but because the methodology that's used for emissions inventories counts them in other ways. And so food is a very important topic for climate change, and it's invisible on our emissions inventory because the emissions from producing food are counted where the food is grown, where the emissions occur, not where the food is eaten. And so the pie chart makes it look like our food has no climate impact. Our food has climate impact. And consumption. Everything that we buy online, everything we buy from a Walmart or a Target is made somewhere from raw materials using energy. The emissions are counted where that stuff is made and where the transportation occurs, not where the eventual consumption occurs. So yes, if we consume less, we reduce emissions. It doesn't show up on Cincinnati's emissions inventory. The stuff we make in Cincinnati shows up, and that's the 20% of our emissions showing up in this industrial slice of the pie. But the Green Cincinnati plan, Cincinnati's sustainability plan, set a goal that we should reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 2% per year. We set that goal in 2007 based on a 2006 emissions inventory. And so we've been at it for more than 10 years now. The orange line, diagonal line on your screen shows what that 2% per year glide path would look like, getting us to an 84% reduction by 2050. The first blue line shows where we were in 2006, and the shorter blue line shows where we were on our most recent emissions inventory, just slightly ahead of that 2% per year glide path. So as a community, as everything that happens within the boundaries of the city of Cincinnati, we reduced our emissions 18.4% in the first 9 years of our effort, slightly ahead of 2% per year. And for Cincinnati city government, we've reduced our carbon emissions 36%, almost twice the rate that we set out to do. So how do we do that? The first piece of that is by reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with our energy usage. That's done by using less energy, energy efficiency efforts, and it's done by replacing high carbon energy with low carbon energy. So I won't, the building of solar panels is an important part of that. I know it's already been covered extensively in this discussion. The reduction of coal in the grid has been amazing, from 86% 10 years ago down to 47% right now. And just this week, the owner of the Miami Fort and Zimmer plants announced that those plants would be phased out within the next several years. And so the decline of coal is continuing and continuing. 10 years to go from 86 to 47% feels like a long time when you're living it day to day, but when you look back on it, that's a lightning fast pace. Doing energy efficiency. In Cincinnati city buildings, we've invested about $20 million in order to save about $5 or $6 million a year on our energy bills. It's a good time to talk about doing sustainability Midwestern style. There are some communities in other parts of the country that throw an awful lot of money at sustainability problems. Here in the Midwest, we're pretty frugal. We want to do things as efficiently as possible. And the idea that we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and save money at the same time is right down our alley. And I know that Mayor Cranley would have spoken about the fact that, we're building, roughly $70 million worth of solar panels. But as city government, we're not putting a dime into it. It's totally investor money. What we're doing is buying the energy, and we're buying the energy at cheaper than the grid price. So it's no money down, and it's savings every year. And that's exactly how we like to do sustainability in the Midwest. So going forward, we're going to be seeing a lot more large-scale solar development. We're going to be seeing energy storage battery systems coming online at utility scale, so that we can not only meet our demand with renewables in the middle of the afternoon, but we can take that solar energy and time shift it to other times of day by using battery storage. When we think about transportation, vehicle electrification is a big part of the discussion. City of Cincinnati has committed that our fleet will be 100% electric by 2035. Last year, we put 3 fully electric vehicles in our fleet. We've got 16 currently on order. We have crunched the numbers, and we know that for city government usage, electric vehicles are the most affordable vehicles available to us on the market right now. You pay a little bit of a premium in initial purchase price. We're buying mostly Nissan Leafs and Chevy Bolts, which are relatively affordable for electric vehicles. You pay a small premium compared to a conventional, but then you save a ton of money on fuel. You save a ton of money on maintenance and repairs. You put less vehicles in your fleet because they're more reliable, so they spend less time in the shop. So we don't need as many backup vehicles to keep our crews working while vehicles are cycled in and out of the shop. You add it all up, and we've crunched the numbers. Buying electric vehicles saves us money. And so for passenger vehicles, we're probably done buying internal combustion engines. And I hope all of you are too. Economically, performance-wise, there's really no reason left to buy an internal combustion engine. When we start talking about specialty vehicles, city government has trash trucks, bucket trucks, dump trucks, all kinds of things for which electric product is not yet available. And so as soon as that electric product is available at a reasonable price, we will be switching to that. We expect over the next 5 to 7 years, we'll be able to stop buying conventional vehicles, even for our heavy equipment. Right now, the passenger vehicles are working for us and would probably be working for all of you. Food. The Green Cincinnati.
Hey, Larry, quick question.
Sure.
On that last slide, what was the map on the left?
Yeah, the map on the left shows the density of electric vehicle registrations in US cities in 2018. And so you can see that Cincinnati is one of the mild blue colors. It's not one of the bright blue colors like California, where they have a lot more electric vehicles. But ever since 2010, Cincinnati has been offering free parking at all city parking meters for fully electric vehicles. We have a program where you can register and get a little windshield sticker that exempts you if you have an electric vehicle from paying for parking meters. When we introduced that program in 2010, it was frankly cheap symbolism. We made a big statement for electric vehicles and it cost us nothing because there were no electric vehicles. The first couple of years of the program, we had 3 vehicles in the program and they were all shade tree conversions, things that somebody pulled out the internal combustion engine and put in an electric motor themselves. But right now we have almost 1,000 vehicles in that program and it's growing roughly 50% per year. And so we are one of the solid electric vehicle uptake communities because we've been incentivizing it for so long. When we talk about food, it's both about where your food is grown and what food choices you make. So Cincinnati's urban agriculture program uses approximately 40 city-owned parcels of land that we lease out to the community to grow food on. We've started local food hubs. We have a mini grant program where we subsidize local urban agriculture. And so we're doing what we can to help improve access to fresh local food for residents, to help increase the supply of fresh local food. One of the most important things is what we choose to eat. And when you talk about eating lower on the food chain, eating a more plant-strong diet, most of us at this point have heard that carbon emissions associated with beef is significantly higher than carbon emissions associated with any other food source. That's especially true because cows have what's called enteric fermentation. They eat kinds of plants that you and I could not digest, and they have anaerobic bacteria in their gut that breaks that stuff down, but produces a lot of methane, and methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. But it's not just the enteric fermentation. It's the fact that cattle in the United States largely eat cereal crops. And if you take the amount of food that would feed 100 people on grain, and you take that grain and feed it to cows, you get back enough meat to feed 4 people. That is, the process of taking your grain and passing it through a cow is 96% calorie inefficient. You're throwing away 96% of the food value in the grains. And so that's why meat, being at the pinnacle of a food chain, is highly, highly inefficient for all kinds of resources, greenhouse gas emissions, but also the amount of fossil fuels that go in as fertilizer, the amount of energy that goes into production, farm equipment that you have to drive, all that kind of stuff. So changing our diets is one of the most powerful things that we can do to influence greenhouse gas emissions.
Hey, Larry, we actually have a question about the last slide from Gwen. It's in the chat if you want to read it, but I can read it aloud as well.
Would you read it?
Yeah. She says, I have a question about the city-owned properties which are being used as a community garden. If the property is owned by the city, can a community restrict who can garden in that plot? How much control does a community have over a city-owned garden that is insured by the Civic Garden Center?
Good. So for the properties that are being used for food production, there is a range of different models, and so it's all different. Some of it we're leasing to individuals who are making their living by growing food. So a small scale urban farm will be a lease to one grower, and that grower is growing food for their own profit, but mostly selling through farmers markets and local food hubs. And actually, most of the small growers in our community are very community minded and have different kinds of partnerships with their community. Mostly the true community gardens, the ones where there are a bunch of raised beds and various people from the community each have a raised bed, what we usually do is lease that land to a community council or a civic garden center, Turner Farms, one of the nonprofits that are engaged in urban agriculture, and they administer the site under that lease. And so the city is not directly involved in how they administer those sites. I think if there was an allegation that that those decisions were being made inappropriately or in an exclusionary way, we certainly would take those concerns very seriously. I've not heard any allegations like that. I wonder what's behind the question that was asked. But mostly those plots are made available to community members, and mostly it's people who live within a couple of blocks of the garden site that want a garden. It's mostly people that don't have access to a backyard and want that garden site to be within walking distance. If you're driving to a garden and you have to make that trip several times a week to keep up your garden, you quickly get to the point where the time and money you're investing in transportation isn't justified by the crop that you get out of it. So mostly those sites are administered pretty non-controversially. I'm not, there have been situations where for various reasons, somebody who's been a consistent grower for several years has a change in their life circumstance and a site is not fully utilized for a year, maybe 2. And if we see that pattern, then we will go in and find out what's going on and see how we get that property transferred into the hands of somebody who will more fully utilize it. We have had a couple of situations where gardens have ended up untended and neighbors have been concerned about untrimmed weeds and those kinds of things. And so, like any other program, there's a certain amount of maintenance that has to happen in order to keep things running well.
Larry, this is Gwen. I think
Hey,
I'm
Gwen.
on. Okay, great. Now I'm specifically talking about the mistreatment of a homeless lady who happens to be a Sierra Club member by the South Cumminsville Garden, by the community council, by a couple individuals there. So I'll probably try to talk to Robin about it because I think she's still the one working on that, isn't she?
Robin is the one working on it, and she would be a great person to take that to. I'm not personally familiar with that situation that you're describing. We can talk about it offline.
Yep, that's because you haven't been told yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Larry, and I actually also have a personal question actually for myself, not from the audience necessarily, but I wondered in terms of the like going forward in terms of agriculture, if, you know, discussing with the farmers surrounding the Cincinnati area, if them focusing on regenerative farming as a way to combat a lot of the carbon in our atmosphere, if that's a topic of conversation or not.
Yes, the regenerative agriculture and regenerative land management is a big topic. There's a growing awareness that how we manage our land has a lot to do with how much carbon is sequestered there. Actually, Ollie Kroner on my staff is involved in a national work group that a number of cities are sort of working this through together. And some of the leading work has been done in more rural areas for, you know, no-till agriculture and that kind of thing, and getting large-scale agriculture to adopt those changes is critically important. But what it looks like in urban agriculture is a little different, and figuring out the application to cities is something that is a relatively new topic and one that we are paying attention to. I also want to say that as weather gets more extreme and more unpredictable and conventional farming becomes less reliable, one of the things that we're seeing here in Cincinnati is an increasing embracing of indoor agriculture. At this point, there are 3 companies that are on the ground in Cincinnati earning their livings by growing food in warehouse settings under LED lights with intensive tray systems of various kinds. And when we look at the amount of food that you can produce in indoor farming, you get way more food per square foot than you do outdoors, partly because you can go year round, partly because you can stack in trays from floor to ceiling. And so from a reasonably small warehouse facility, you can get an amount of food that really makes a difference for feeding a community. And that's some of the pictures that you have on your slide right now. One of the things that I love about the indoor agriculture is that agricultural jobs become year-round in one location under climate-controlled conditions in urban areas where unemployment rates tend to be relatively high. And so if we can make agricultural jobs quality year-round jobs, we can actually have a big workforce development component associated with the growth of indoor agriculture in urban areas. And so produce jobs that, you know, that frankly Americans will do, because lots of the traditional agricultural jobs are ones that Americans just don't do. So that'll be an interesting development, and we'll have to see the pace at which that indoor agriculture continues to ramp up. When we start talking about waste and reducing our landfill dependence, the question is, to a lesser degree about climate change and to a greater degree about resource efficiency. You know, as we're at 7 billion people and projected to go to 8.5 billion on the planet by 2050, we know that we're on a finite sized planet with a finite pool of resources. And if we use things once and throw them away, that's just not going to work. And so the idea of closing the loop, having, like in nature, the output from every process be the input to some other process, is the way we have to restructure our economy. And so here in Cincinnati, one of the big opportunities is that we need either commercial composting facilities or anaerobic digesting facilities that can take food waste and other kinds of organic waste and convert it into usable energy and usable soil amendments, and stop putting that stuff in the landfill. But all of our other resources need to be recaptured and put back into the manufacturing process so that we can make our new products out of our old products. You know, here in Cincinnati, we have approximately a 70% participation rate in curbside recycling. That's really good. We have yard waste collection and diversion, and that's really good. But we're still really only recycling about 30% of the waste that we generate. And so there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to get anywhere near a closed cycle economy. And so the final thing, well, not the final thing. One of the things that I haven't talked very much about in this presentation, but is taking up an increasing focus in our work, is environmental equity and making sure that all the programs we run, all the work that we do is reaching the entire community. And we can have a rich and detailed discussion from urban agriculture to energy to transportation at how we make that reach all the members of our community. But the parting message that I wanted to leave you with is the opportunity for residents to be part of the process of addressing climate change and addressing sustainability in Cincinnati. It starts, this is going to be a familiar message for most of you on the line, with greening your lifestyle, changing your diet, planting a garden, using active transportation like walking and biking, being more energy efficient and converting to renewable energy. Volunteering, you know, being in support of many of the nonprofit organizations in our community that are doing sustainability work, like the Sierra Club that you all on the line are already doing. This is a presentation that I often use for school groups. And so talking to student groups, the pitch for volunteering is a very appropriate pitch. Also to focus your studies, to choose a green economy. The green economy is growing faster than the conventional economy. And so the idea that if sustainability is something that's important to you, you can probably find a way to make it your career, is a message that I like to plant with the students. And then finally, advocacy, to let our policymakers and decision makers know that this is something that's important to all of you, so that we can get policies from our local and national governments that are supportive of sustainability. So let me end the presentation there and give you a chance to ask your questions and have this become more of a discussion about how we take our community and move our community towards being more climate neutral, more sustainable. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all today.
Thank you very much, Larry. And yeah, if anybody wants to unmute themselves or raise their hand to ask a question, please feel free to.
I had a question for Larry. So, Larry, I know there was a big vote for a new tax in Hamilton County in regards to transportation and supporting the Metro bus system. I don't know about like rider percentage or how big an impact you think that has on overall reduction of like the carbon footprint within Hamilton County. Interested in your thoughts on that and how the Metro bus system could be used in that way.
It's huge, and thanks for raising it. And normally I raise it on my own, so thanks for helping fill in the gaps here. Cincinnati is one of the, until recently, was the only major metropolitan area in the country that did not have a regional funding mechanism for transit, where all of the funding for transit came from city, not from region. And so our transit system doesn't serve the region very well. When you look at metropolitan areas that are really designed around transit and really embrace transit, it can be a huge percentage of your mobility comes without bringing a car with you. And you know, transit usually isn't standalone. Transit is, as the commercials used to say, an important part of this complete breakfast. It takes all forms of mobility to complete the picture. You know, we have bike share that has grown up recently. We have car share programs, increasing bike lanes, the red bike program, all kinds of ways to get around, but they all add up to helping us use cars less. And as I look into the future and we see driverless vehicles gaining a toehold, people will more and more travel without bringing their cars with them. And so that'll make it easier and easier. But right now, mode share, transit is about 3% of how our community gets around. And so if we can double transit usage, and that's a reasonable forecast with the big increased investment that we're putting into transit, you know, a 3% reduction in transit impact would be huge. And that's, you know, the growth in the next probably 5 to 10 years. As we look further out, it can be even bigger. And so, yeah, the ballot issue for transit was a huge step forward for sustainability. I will say that OES was part of that campaign, and partly through the partnership that we have with Bloomberg Philanthropies through the American Communities Climate Challenge, we were able to direct significant grant funding and technical assistance to the transit campaign and to the polling work that helped shape the transit campaign. And so, you know, the city sustainability office was behind the scenes, but playing an important role. It was a very close election. So the work that all of you did on it, the work that we did on it, almost everybody can claim to have done enough to make the difference because it was that close an election. Thanks, Dave, for raising that. Other questions?
Larry, I have a question for you.
Yes.
This is Larry Bloomfield. As a result of coronavirus and a lot of people working from home, is there a focus now possibly on discussing with various local businesses the possibility of having people work from home more?
Yeah, great question, Larry, and thanks for asking. During the coronavirus pandemic, carbon emissions have been reduced significantly, largely because our economy cratered, and that is not the way we want to reduce carbon emissions. We need to find a way to live a sustainable lifestyle and meet human needs for our community. Just letting people go without is not the way that we intend to do this. And so some of the innovations that have happened because of the coronavirus are things that the jury is still out on, whether they're permanent changes or whether we're going to snap back as soon as the pandemic is over. And so the idea that it has become so normal to have these discussions via Zoom rather than in a live room. And so here we had this meeting that normally 50 people would have driven to, and we'd have a parking lot full of cars, and none of us went anywhere, is great. And if we can keep doing that, if we can attend virtual conferences instead of flying, if we can have virtual presence at work and work from home instead of commuting back and forth to the office, all of those things are great for reducing carbon footprint. And the jury is still out on whether we're able to make those things permanent. We'll have to see. The other big change that I've seen in my workplace, and I've heard other people talk about it as well, is that, you know, while we've been talking for probably decades about computers helping us go to a paperless workplace, up until recently, we haven't made any progress towards a paperless workplace. If anything, the computers help us hit that print button and burn paper faster than ever. Up until recently in city government, if we had a bid process, we required people to give us 10 hard copies of their bid so we could take our bid committee and give a full paper copy of all the bids to everybody. Now we're sending them electronic copies because we didn't feel safe touching pieces of paper that other people had touched. And so that's what got us to go to an electronic bid process. When we did contracts, our contracts have signature lines for 6 different departments to sign off before the city manager makes the final official signature that makes a contract effective. And we had people walking and driving contracts all over the place, collecting signatures. And now we've decided it's not safe to do that. And we've gone to electronic signature processes. And so we're using a lot less paper. Is that something we're going to continue to do, or we're going to snap back? It's not exactly clear, but there's a real possibility that some of the innovations for COVID that are also advantageous for sustainability may become the new normal, may be something that we're able to continue doing going forward. It would be a great silver lining to the cloud if we're able to permanently drive less.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Larry.
This is Doug Jose. Larry, we didn't really get a whole lot of detail regarding the solar farm project. I wonder if you could quickly give us your perspective on where that stands and the timeline associated with moving forward.
Yeah, we expect the groundbreaking to, so within, back about a year ago, last October, we signed the first contracts for the solar farm. That locked in about 35 megawatts of solar for use in city buildings, and locked in the capacity to use that solar farm to supply a portion of our electricity aggregation program. Many of you probably know that the city, through its aggregation program, buys electricity on behalf of 60,000 residential and small commercial customers in the city. And we provide a 100% green product, but up until, as of now, that's been mostly through renewable energy credits, a REC-backed product that we provide that's 100% green. We've always wanted to be able to provide actual locally generated renewable energy. And so 65 megawatts of what's going to be built. We just within the last month locked in the contracts for the aggregation program that is going to be taking about 65 megawatts of the generation from that solar farm. So it's a total of 100 megawatts. 100 megawatts is enough to cover about 400 acres with solar panels. It's about a $70 million construction project. And that project is going to be out in Brown County, about 40 miles east of town. It's on a site that is already permitted and approved by the state for solar panel construction. But construction hadn't started because the developer didn't have a buyer for the energy. Now they have the buyer for the energy locked in, and we expect them to be doing the groundbreaking within about the next 2 months. By July of 21, about 9 months from now, the first 35 megawatts of that will be online and generating. By the end of calendar 21, we expect the full system to be up and producing. So that's the basic outline. What we did was we put out a bid that said, we are willing to buy renewable energy. We're willing to sign a long-term contract to buy renewable energy. You, vendor, have to find the site and fund the construction and build the system and deliver the electricity to us cheaper than what we're currently buying off the grid. If you can do all of that, we will buy it and we will lock in a 20-year fixed price. And we actually had 8 companies that responded to that bid and said, yes, we have a place to build it. We'll fund the construction and beat the current grid price of electricity. Yes, we can do that. And we'll give you a price and guarantee it as a fixed price, no escalator for 20 years. And so that's the basic parameters of the contract that we built, that we signed. And the idea that solar energy right now can beat the grid prices is something that more and more large energy users are aware of. People like Fifth Third Bank have signed power purchase agreements to meet 100% of their electricity need because they found that it was not just a good sustainability move, it was a good economic move. And so more and more of the big energy users are going in that direction. One of the challenges that we have is how to bring that green energy and affordable energy to residences. When we do rooftop solar works economically, but it's a pretty long payback. It's 10 or 12 years for most systems. And rooftop solar is more expensive than utility. You know, when I go out to a field in Brown County and build 100 megawatts of solar, the blended price is about 70 cents a watt. And if I put it on a home in Cincinnati, the price that I get is more like $2 a watt, about 2.5 times as expensive as the utility scale development. And that's just the economies of scale. It's harder to do small. It's more expensive to do small. And so the work right now is how we do not just affordable solar, but distributed solar so everybody can own their little piece of it. That would be great. But right now, what's really working economically is the big solar farms, and that's what we've got under construction to meet city needs and to meet the needs of the aggregation program. Did that cover what you were asking about, Doug? Were there other aspects of the system that you were interested in?
No, that's pretty much what I was looking for. Appreciate it.
One of the discussions that's sometimes raised about this, and some of you probably have it on your minds, and so I'll talk about it a little bit, is the place that we're building these solar panels is currently in soybeans. And so this is not the first time that the United States has had to address trade-offs between land being used for food production and land being used for energy production, and how we make sure we're meeting food needs, especially for hungry Americans, when we're converting land to energy production. And it's an important topic, and it's a topic that requires some thought. One of the places where I start in evaluating this is in recognizing that right now in the United States, approximately 25% of our soybean crop is used for biodiesel production. A lot of our soybean land is already energy land, not food land. And whether that's a good thing or not is a nuanced discussion that we should probably have at some point, but that land is already energy land. And so then the question I ask is, which is better, using an acre of land for biodiesel production or using an acre of land for solar panels? And so we crunched numbers on that. And if you take an acre of land and grow soybeans and use those soybeans to make biodiesel, you get enough fuel to drive a vehicle about 4,000 miles. And if you take an acre of land and use it to build solar panels, and you use those solar panels to power an electric vehicle, you get enough electricity to drive the electric vehicle about 100,000 miles. And so you're getting 25 times as much power out of that same acre of land by building solar panels than you are by doing biodiesel. And so that's what makes me comfortable that in this situation, it's not a close call. If we're displacing biodiesel and using it for electricity, we're getting 25 times as much energy out of that land. If we get to the point where we're no longer doing biodiesel and all of our soybeans really are food crops, I don't want to be taking tofu out of anybody's mouth. But that's not my understanding of what we're doing here.
We did have a question.
On my screen, you've just frozen, Nicole.
Yeah, same here.
Doug, do you have the chat box up? Can you read me the question?
Yes, I can. Have we not cleaned up coal? Should not Ohioans be proud of coal as a resource? People in coal industry will be put out of work.
You know, there's very few people in the coal industry. There are far more solar jobs in Ohio than there are coal jobs in Ohio. There's actually more solar jobs in West Virginia than coal jobs in West Virginia. The idea that somebody with a pick and a mining helmet is going down into the mines every day is a 30-year-old image. Our coal mines are mostly automated. We've got equipment operators, truck drivers, and drill operators that are down there, not guys with picks. And relatively few of them, and they're mostly relatively high-skilled individuals that are going to have a relatively easy time relocating. The miners that we have as our image of coal communities, those guys got crowded out 30 years ago. Clean coal, at this point, to my knowledge, does not exist. You get a lot of carbon and you get a lot of particulates from the burning of coal. And so to have coal phased out of our production portfolio as fast as that can happen from a sustainability perspective would be what I would want to see. It's very important that we pay attention to our coal communities and we find ways to help people who've been displaced transition to new careers and greener, more sustainable careers. There are certainly people who are getting left behind in industries that are not going to carry forward in the future. Hopefully, people who are currently working the frack fields of natural gas will need a new career in the next 5 to 10 years, and we ought to help them redirect their skills. Right now, those frack fields are still booming. Natural gas is far cheaper than coal, and really natural gas more than solar is what's putting coal out of business. But we have passed the tipping point that solar in Ohio is now cheaper than natural gas in Ohio. And so we can hope that when we're done phasing out the coal plants, that the natural gas plants will be next. HB6 is a great topic when we talk about what keeps coal functioning in Ohio. The fuel coal plants that are not being phased out, it's because they're being subsidized, and HB6, that was the big bailout for the nuclear power plants, was also a bailout for a couple of obsolete coal plants that are otherwise non-competitive. And so if folks like the Sierra Club and other environmental organizations in Cincinnati, in Ohio, are successful in getting our state legislature to repeal HB6, that will help us phase out some of the few remaining coal plants in the state. I suspect there are people on the screen that know more about the HB6 topic than I do.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
And I don't see any other hands up or questions in the chat, so I think maybe we can wrap it up.
All right.
Nicole, you got anything?
No, I don't have anything. I'm not seeing any hand raise or anything.
Okay, well, let's wrap up a little bit early. Larry, we certainly appreciate you stepping into the breach here and giving us a very comprehensive look at what Cincinnati's doing. We appreciate it very much.
Yeah,
And,
thanks for giving me the opportunity to. I enjoyed being here with you this evening.
All right, thanks again. And with that, we'll terminate the recording as well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Larry. Good to see everyone.